All right, folks, and welcome back to iWizard. We have a special guest with us today, and this would be the author, Faith Moore, who just wrote an excellent book called A Christmas. Is it Christmas Carol or A Christmas Carol?
There's no A.
There's no A. So it's Christmas Carol with a K. And I'll tell you how I picked this up. I was reading When Christmas Comes by Andrew Klavan, Lord of the Multiverse. And when I decided to pick that up, I picked this up at the same time. And then I said, I need all the Klavan-y goodness. I said, I could definitely go on to the second book in the Cameron Winter series, or I don't think that's about Christmas, or I could have another Klavan Christmas read. So I picked this up and we both read it and we loved it and wanted to have you on. So welcome. And maybe you could tell our listeners, what is Christmas Carol about?
Sure. And first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm glad you enjoyed the book. Christmas Carol is a modern retelling of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, but the Scrooge character has been reimagined as a workaholic mom named Carol. That's why it's Christmas Carol with a K. And but her miserliness is not about her money, the way that Scrooge's is. It's about her time and how much time she chooses to spend or not spend with her family. And so we meet her on Christmas Eve when she is inventing all kinds of reasons to not be at home with her kids and her husband and instead go into work. And then she suffers a fall and finds herself in a very strange hospital where she is taken on a tour through her past, present, and future in the hopes that she'll remember what really matters, which is her family.
So were you trying to capture the feel of the original Christmas Carol, or did you set out to do something entirely different?
I wanted to stay true to the kind of emotional and narrative arc of Dickens's Christmas Carol. And that was really important to me. I didn't want to, this is a beloved story that I love, that millions of people love and have loved throughout time. And therefore I didn't want to just kind of say I was making my story based on this story and then like completely trash the thing. I wanted to stay very true to it. And so I did all kinds of nerdy things like plot out, in a spreadsheet, Dickens's story, and then my story kind of beat for beat, and all of the characters and their names and my characters and their names, and, kind of in the attempt of not kind of making Dickens fans die or making Dickens roll over in his grave or anything like that. But at the same time, I absolutely hate it when people take a story where the male protagonist and just turn him into a woman, but then have everything be exactly the same. Yeah. I hate that because obviously if the male character is a good character, of a believable character, then he's going to behave like a man. And so you can't put a woman into that and just leave it the way that it was. So the way that I kind of describe it is that the story arc is the same. The emotional arc is the same, but the themes are completely different. And the characters are completely different. And the reason why she needs this redemption is different. And the kind of reasons that she got there, et cetera, are different. So it's kind of a framework with different themes plugged in.
Was there a part of you that was tempted to call it A Christmas Karen at all, at any point?
That would be amazing. But no, I think that was a little too gimmicky for me, but I love that. And somebody should write that. Someone should.
Yeah.
Not me, but somebody should.
I'm wondering, have you always been a fan of Dickens' A Christmas Carol? Now, you didn't upset me because Dickens is literally my favorite author. And I thought it was splendid. Actually, I'll tell you one thing. There was only one thing I didn't like in the whole book. And that was the little girl who was taking Carol through her life. And when she said, shut up to an adult, I said, oh, how dare you?
Yeah, but she's not quite a little girl.
I know.
Right. That's right. Yeah. It's funny. People either love her or hate her. So yeah, the ghost of Christmas Past is a little girl. And so Dickens describes his ghost of Christmas Past as someone who is both young and old at once.
It makes sense. It makes
total
sense.
And so I was trying to give you someone who was a little girl, but also had a sort of sassiness and a sort of maturity that maybe a little girl wouldn't or shouldn't have.
Absolutely. So I have heard from Andrew and from Spencer that you guys and your family are big fans of Christmas Carol, and especially one of the movies. And so I know that's a big part of your family and the way that you guys celebrate Christmas. Have you had this idea in your head for a long time? Is this just like an idea that you've had like since college or something like that? Or was it a flash insight one Christmas as you guys were watching, I don't know, for the 30th time in a row, the same Christmas Carol film?
Which version is it?
So the answer is the second one. So it's the Alistair Sim version of A Christmas Carol, which I think came out in 1951 or somewhere around there. It's a black and white movie. And we watch it every year. We have watched it every year since I was very little. I took a break for a couple of years when I was very frightened of the movie. It's had some scary parts and I had to take a little break, but then I came back. And it's one of those movies, where we kind of quote it at each other. It's sort of shorthand for different emotional experiences in our lives. And I had to explain to my husband when we got together and got married that, like, if I'm saying something that doesn't really make any sense to you, it's just a quote from that movie. Like I just sort of blurt these things out. So that it's a story that's really kind of imprinted on my heart, and something that I feel like has a lot of emotional touchstones for me. So what happened was, it was the Christmas at the tail end of the pandemic. So I think it was like 2021 Christmas. And so it had been a couple of years. I live in New York, so we had a particularly bad sort of lockdown experience. And all the working parents had been home. They'd been home for a couple of years at that point. And having to suddenly bump up against the idea of having it all. That, now they were at home working remotely full time, but also their kids were home doing school remotely full time. And they were suddenly like, this is insane. My kid is supposed to be on a Zoom at this time, but I have a work Zoom at this time. And how are we, where are they going? What are we doing? And I was kind of watching this from the outside because I've been a stay-at-home mom since my older son was born. He's almost 9. So I'd been home all this time. So that was kind of interesting to see that happening. But the other thing that was happening that I didn't expect was how many parents I was hearing say how wonderful it was to be home with their kids and to sort of learn things about their kids that they didn't know, or do things with their kids and kind of bond in that way and experience things together. And I was like, oh, wow, that's nice. A nice sort of silver lining to this whole experience. And then the pandemic ended and all the restriction lifted and everybody went back to work.
Yeah.
And so it was when I watched that movie that Christmas of everybody kind of going back to work that I was like, oh, it's kind of the same thing. Like, these people had this ability that they normally don't have to see into what they were missing. But because, life is life and it wasn't a supernatural experience and it wasn't maybe big enough or, whatever, they didn't really act on it. So I was thinking, well, what if you took a working parent, a working mom, and you kind of amped her up to 100%, like, nobody is as workaholic as Carol is in the book, so because I didn't want people to feel bad, it's not you, it's just, I amped her up. And then I had her go through this experience and kind of showed you maybe why she got there and, what she could do after she figured all of this out. And so that's kind of where it came to me. It did come to me as a sort of flash, like, oh, like, what if this, it was not something that I've been thinking about for a long time.
Yeah. And Carol is like, she is insufferable in the beginning. Like, it's really hard to read her part in the beginning because you're like, what made you this way? Like, why are you the way that you are? And then you go on this emotional roller coaster with her and go through all these experiences that really get you to think, oh my gosh, like, wow, okay, I'm kind of getting it. But you go through a lot of emotions when you're reading it. And
Good.
So when you were writing it, what scene was really the most challenging to write, and how did you get in the headspace to do that?
It's funny because I absolutely love all of these questions about, like, how did this happen, or what was your process and all those things, because that's really what I want to talk about as a novelist. There's a lot of kind of themes that are interesting to talk about the book, but for me, like, this book was a process of kind of me pouring this out onto the page, and I love these questions, but I also find them really hard to answer because for me, in a lot of ways, the whole process of writing this book was kind of like being a Victorian medium, you know, who like sits down at the seance and then suddenly all these people are coming in, you know, and I have to just kind of quickly write it down before they are gone, or like take down their messages to pass on.
It sounds
So,
like how Dickens writes, right?
yeah, or like the way that Dickens describes things, right? He lived in that world of
That's
the
right.
of the seance, right? So, and I don't mean to say that it's not work or that I didn't like think about it or plan it, because I did, and I was sort of obsessive about that. But there is a way in which these characters do kind of just come to life. And so in that way, to your question, I do kind of get to experience the whole book play out the way maybe a reader might. And so there were places where like I was sort of like teary, or like that I would laugh or whatever. So, you know, I think for me, the scenes that have to do with Carol and her sister Fran and their mother, and you know, I don't know how many spoilers you want to do, but you know, the mother's illness and how Carol and Fran have to kind of deal with that was hard, because I come from a very loving family, and to think about one's mother going through an illness like that is sort of awful. And then, you know, and I think sort of to your first point, you know, it was hard at first for me as well to relate to Carol, because she's not me in any way. People are always saying like, well, what part of Carol is you? No part of Carol is me, you know? And so I wanted you to very quickly kind of at least have some compassion for her, because otherwise, why would you follow her along on this journey? You know, who cares if she's just evil? So I think that was tricky too, is kind of how do I paint this person so that you really don't like her and you really feel like she needs to change. This is horrible. She's doing horrible things to her family. But also I'm willing to come with her on this journey and get her there. So I think that was tricky too. And I think I spent the most time on the first chapter, like just sort of tinkering and tinkering and tinkering, so that you could kind of get the information that you needed, but also some sense that there was maybe something else going on under the surface, so that you might want to keep reading and find out what it was.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed is that as much as I love the original Dickens story, your book is more romantic than the original Christmas Carol. In fact, I was telling my wife, and this is not an insult, it's a compliment. It really is. If you know me, this is a compliment. I love genre fiction. I said she could be a really successful and talented romance author in the best way. I don't mean Fabio like on a pirate ship.
No, thank you.
I mean like almost like I don't know, you probably wouldn't do this, like a Christian romance novelist, like, and you could be really like big, because I got sucked into it, and I had so many memories of me and Nikki and how we met.
The Bo and Carol meeting scene was like kind of similar to like how we met.
Very
and
similar.
So it was like,
really, you were hiding behind a curtain at a party? What were you
no,
doing back there?
For a party, but it was not hiding behind a curtain. But it was like it had that feel to it.
But we did meet at a holiday party, and
it was Halloween though,
and dialogue was so good. I just, have you ever considered going in that direction of like doing romance and like making this like a full-time career once your kids are old enough or whatever?
Well, so I'm really glad that you're saying all of this, and I do not take that as an insult at all. I love it. Because really, the only kinds of stories that I want to tell have a love story at the heart of them. And, you know, I know that this story is really, in a lot of ways, a story about a woman kind of coming back to her family and her children, like, and re-embodying the motherhood role. But for me, it was a story about a woman falling back in love with her husband. That was what the story was to me. And I feel like, one, because I just love to tell that kind of story, but two, because I feel like the emotional heart of a family is the mother and the father and the relationship that they have. And so if that relationship is broken, it doesn't really matter how much time she then spends with her children. The family is still going to be hurting in some way. And so for me, that was actually the emotional core of the story, was kind of showing you how these two people came together, how they kind of drifted apart, and then bringing them back together again was really the kind of arc for me of this story. I think the problem with romance books in general is that in order for you to really kind of identify with a love story or get really involved in a love story, I think that it has to take place within a broader context of something else. I think that I would love to just sort of sit there and like write about the intricacies of people falling in love. Like that feels very exciting to me. But I think that it's best when like this is happening, you know, kind of on a stage where like other things are playing out and the love story just kind of like happens within those things. So those are the kind of stories that I want to tell. I definitely have lots more stories that I want to tell that involve that. And yes, I hope to do it more and more and more as my kids grow up.
Awesome.
Yeah. And by the end of the book, like it made me really want to appreciate everything in my own life more. So you did accomplish that most definitely. And there were certain parts of Carol, and this like scared me. And there were certain parts of her I was like, I can see thinking that. And like, especially like certain feelings, like when she's a high powered lawyer and she's on a case and she gets that that like rush of purpose and she like just that drives her forward. So are there any parts of Carol that you identify with, or you feel like you may have been like on the brink at some point of like maybe going more in that direction? Have you had any kind of Carol moment in your life?
Yeah. Well, I think so. I don't feel like I have ever been on the brink of sort of leaving my family and going off to work. That's just not me. And I don't actually judge anyone for doing that. Like this book is not a manifesto about what other people should do. And I'm not other people's mom. I have 2 kids and that's enough. But I certainly think that there's a way in which in our current culture, in our current society, for women, work feels more successful. It makes you feel more successful to be at work, not just because that's the narrative, and it is. The narrative is, you know, graduate college, get a high-powered job, climb the corporate ladder, and like have some kids along the way, right? That's the narrative for how to be a valuable and successful and important woman, right? But it's not just that. It's that when you are at work, there are obvious and measurable things that tell you if you're doing a good job, right? Your boss comes in and says, great job on that project. Well done. You get a promotion, you know, you get a raise, you get a bonus. Your coworkers look to you for advice. All of that makes you feel, hey, like, good, I'm doing it. I'm doing a good job. I'm successful. I'm appreciated and supported. Meanwhile, if you're at home, the people who are around you, just like, you know, your coworkers and your boss around you at home, the people around you are like throwing things at your head, lying on the floor, screaming, and like dumping food on the floor, you know, and also giving you kisses and loving hugs and, you know, being super cute and wonderful. But your husband is not your boss. It's not his job to come home and say like, you know, well, this month, you know, you changed 586,000 diapers. Well done. You know, it's not his job to do that. And it's not your kid's job, nor is this like something they're capable of. They can't be like, well done, mommy. You know, you made my lunch every single day and I was always dressed appropriately for school. It doesn't happen. So I think, you know, for me and for, you know, there are things in my life like writing, you know, or other kind of work things where like you get more immediate positive feedback than just sort of like the daily chaos of being a mom. And I think that is relatable. It's relatable to feel like, wow, things are really chaotic and confusing at home. So let me just bury myself in my work where I feel successful. And so I think that, you know, we can have some compassion for that.
Yeah, I speaking of a lot of that conversation, I found it interesting as I was reading this book that I was able to connect with this book on a deep level. And I have had a couple of experiences where I'll just share. I'm a full-time high school English teacher, and we're working on a novel, and you know, I write articles from time to time, and I do this booktube show. So I'm a very busy modern person. My wife is a college professor with a PhD, and she is a very busy girl boss type a little bit. And I just know that in the beginning of the book, when I was following Carol around and she was just getting stressed out about other people being happy and taking their time and eating, like, you know, walking around and, ooh, this popcorn is yummy. It's like, get out of my way. And the thing is
right.
It's very easy to judge her, but I've had experiences where I've found myself in public and there'll be a person having like a 20-second conversation at the register, and I'm behind them, and I'm like, you know, and I turn into this efficiency monster, this modern, like icky person. And then I'll sit down and watch a Hallmark movie, and I love the quaint Hallmark village where everyone's happy and talking to each other. Then when I go to the store, I'm this like modern, hyper atomized, like, you know, person who wants to be successful. And I'm like, stop talking to the clerk and get out of my way. I'm trying to get home. Did you have experiences like that you kind of put into Carol?
Well, I certainly have had experiences like that. I mean, I had one the other day. I was trying to buy all the stocking stuffers for like everyone in my family. And I had like a giant basket of things. And the guy had like the scanner, you know, and he was holding it near the thing, but not actually scanning it because he wanted to tell me something about various state flags. And I was just like, scan it. Scan, like just scan it, like, you know, I was like, please, like I need to get out of here. So I certainly have had that experience, and so I think it's probably true that like that informs, you know, my writing, anything that I am experiencing. But I think more than that, it was that when you tap into the experience of someone who is so checked out from life, which is kind of what Carol is. I mean, that's what the Christmas Carol story is too. Even Dickens is kind of, it's about someone who's had, I mean, this is a modern word, but like so much trauma in their life that they've kind of said like, well, if life is joy and pain, I'm willing to check out of the joy because I can't handle the pain. I mean, that's what Scrooge is doing, and it's what Carol is doing. And so when you're that kind of checked out from humanity, then everything is like that checkout thing, right? Like everything is, you can't handle anything. You can't handle anybody's like excitement or happiness or beauty or anything like that. So it's like we've all had little moments of that, of course, but for Carol, every moment is that.
Yeah, and one of the things that's so smart about your construction of Carol and about the book in general is that you take a miserly, miserable, heartless, penny pinching, curmudgeonly Scrooge, and you turn him into, because you obviously can't take Scrooge and just make a modern version of him. You did it in a different way that has a similar outcome. You turn him into a cell phone distracted, workaholic, girl boss mom. And what's funny is that while Carol would be more charming at, say, a cocktail party, right? Unlike Scrooge, when you meet Carol and interact with her in a setting where she's got sort of social savoir-faire, you're going to be impressed by her, and you're going to think she's charming and not a miser, but the outcome is the same. She makes everyone in her orbit feel lonely and miserable and sad, and her family, she's not taking care of her family in the way that she needs to. And so the central conceit here and the way that you changed Scrooge was genius. But I wanted to ask, do you think that it would be theoretically possible? I'm not saying the book would have sold as well or it would have had the impact that you wanted to, but just theoretically, run with me. Would it be possible to write this story about some successful but absent father? These guys that work like, 80 hours a week and are always gone, and you really don't know what they're doing, and they're not there for their families. They're outsourcing. They're having like nannies and all these other people do all these things and buy gifts for their wife and kids and stuff like that. Would it be possible to do this with a man, or is there something about mothers and motherhood that makes it all the more important that they should actually be home and have time to raise their kids? Like, does Carol's problem apply to men as well?
Yeah, but I think that story has been told over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because that idea of the workaholic dad is a trope, right? I mean, just last night we watched Elf. I'd never seen it, the Will Ferrell movie, and
oh yes, yeah,
I hated it. But because it was bad, but also like that. But that trope was in that movie, right? It's about this sort of workaholic father, and then he has to learn through the magic of Christmas, as embodied by Will Ferrell's
Mad Men
Elf
as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is a trope, that the workaholic dad. And so, and the reason that is a trope is because, men, that's a kind of male thing. Like they go off and they are ambitious and successful, and they should be. but then there's a kind of precipice that they fall off, or a kind of tightrope that they have to walk, where yes, you're the breadwinner, you need to be the breadwinner because you've got this family at home, but you also have to be emotionally involved and engaged with your wife and with your children. And when you aren't, something is missing. Like I was saying, at the core of the family, something is missing because the father has checked out. And I think this is a different kind of story, because I guess what I'm saying is, well, in today's society, women are doing that too. And it's almost, I think what makes it different is when a man goes out to work, in theory, the goal is that he's providing for the family at home, and that there is a mother who, she doesn't have to be like barefoot in the kitchen with an apron all the time. But, there is a mother who is more kind of involved in the day-to-day of the house and the, school pickups and things like that. And she's there making that run smoothly. And he's out making it so that she can do that, so that they have enough money to have all of those things. So when the mother is doing it, there's a kind of added level of like, something is wrong here if you're going out in that way, in the way of Carol,
Right.
like that you're just completely disassociating from your mother role.
Yeah, and that's what makes your story more compelling, because if it was a man in that role, like you said, we've seen that so many times, but the automatic kind of emotional response is like, what's wrong with her? Like, why is she ignoring her family like that? Why have children if they're bugging you and you don't want to spend time with them and you just want to be at work? And at some point you have Marley say, when the job comes first, everybody wins. And on the one hand, right, that comes from an important place, and it comes from a place of love initially from Carol. But can you speak more to that?
Yeah, to the idea of like your family comes first, or your family wins when you're working. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, right. So Carol kind of adopts this idea that, the work is going to make everything okay. It's going to make the family that she wants. But ultimately it's kind of an excuse because of all of the things that we were talking about before, about how she feels more successful at work. She even starts to think that like she's really not a good mother. And so the kids don't really want her around or need her because, they would much rather be with the husband. And so I think, yes, there is a way in which you need to make enough money to live the life that you are living. And for some people, that does mean that you have to go to work. And some mothers have to go to work. So I'm not advocating anything, but if I was advocating anything at all, it wouldn't be to say, well, all mothers must stay home. I mean, that's not a sort of rational proposition. And there are characters in the book who are working women who work in different ways. For example, Carol's assistant, Roberta, is a working mom because she has to work, but she has prioritized her kids, and the family is sort of organized around the children and the couple kind of being able to take care of them. So for me, it's not that we have to completely amputate the part of ourselves that has ambition or creativity or is interested in things outside the home. It's only that the time when our children are small and need us the most is really, really small. And within the trajectory of your whole life, or within the entirety of your whole life, I mean, it's such a small percentage. So I think maybe it's more about just kind of reprioritizing so that you can be there in some capacity while they're younger, and then kind of circle outwards from there. As they grow up and need you less, then you can work more. And I think it's just sort of stepping outside of the narrative a little bit that might kind of give you a different perspective, which is sort of what I was trying to do for Carol, is give her that different perspective.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the double standard too, and that your book does something unique, and that I've actually never really seen anyone criticize a workaholic mom, right? As you said, the trope of the man going out and working all the time and being derelict of his home duties and not being there for his family. You're right. It's kind of a trope or a cliche at this point. But here you are, and you can see the way that Carol's living is deeply a problem But in
Right.
our culture, we are afraid to criticize that because it's like, yes, you go, like, girl boss.
Right.
And it's like, I just found that to be refreshing. Did you mean to, you said this wasn't really a message book per se, but is there kind of a moral lesson in here that you want us to, a central idea, I would say, as a teacher, that you want us grappling with?
Well, again, like, yes, no. I mean, there were themes that I was trying to infuse into the book, or maybe things that I wanted to kind of pop up for you as questions. And yeah, I mean, that is one of them. I think you're right. We never, the narrative is that the girl boss is the goal, that's what you should be doing. You should be girl bossing really hard. And that, your kids are kind of this afterthought, like, you just, like Carol says, like, oh, you meet a man along the way, you have some kids, like that'll happen. But what's your actual career ambition? And, I think that to say, wait a minute, hold on, like, maybe that's not actually a good idea. Maybe it's not a good idea to treat your children as a kind of weird aside, or like a hobby that you have, or
Window
an
dressing.
afterthought.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Maybe it's a good idea to kind of say, if you're going to have kids, and there's no reason you have to have them, but if you're going to have kids, maybe they should sort of be the bedrock, the place where you kind of plan out from. And, during the time when they're home with you, when they're small and they need you. And then, maybe you can think about your career. But yeah, I mean, I was definitely, the idea, when it came to me, I was sort of like, oh, right, this is the reason why I can write this, because we're not talking about this. We're talking about it, like, in the media, people are yelling about it, but we're not telling stories about what it actually looks like when this happens. So yeah, I mean, that was definitely a part of why I felt like I could tell the story.
Did you happen to see, there was an article that came out, I think a couple months ago, in Glamour? It was like the end of the girl boss and the rise of the soft girl culture, in which, like, yeah, now, like, I think Gen Z's seeing that, like, millennials and Gen Xers who put off motherhood, or who thought they could have it all, are just struggling, and
Right.
that they want something different, and they don't want to prioritize work. So did you hear about that?
Well, hold on.
I
Like,
don't think
I love how Gen Z just makes up words like soft girl that are like really old concepts. It's called woman. And they think they've invented something like this is genius. Soft girl.
Right.
You want to try soft girl? It's like,
Right, exactly. I didn't read that article, but I definitely, like, have sort of somehow ingested the concept. And I think, yeah, and people are making fun of all these girls on TikTok who are kind of like, my job, it takes up all this 8 hours in my day, and then I have to commute, and then I have to, like, do my makeup and my hair, and then I just don't have any time for my Netflix, and people are making fun of them, and
I saw that video.
and I think
Yeah.
that the reason that we can make fun of them, though, is because they're actually missing something. So they're saying they want to sit at home and watch Netflix, or they want to go to the Beyonce concert, or they want to, whatever. And so we're making fun of them, like, just do your job. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, everybody, who has a job does this. They put on their clothes, they get in their car, they work for 8 hours, everybody does this. So why are you complaining and crying in your car or whatever? Because what's missing at the center of that is, like, well, you don't have to do any of that if you make a home. If you start a family, just with the two of you, if you couple yourself with somebody and get married, and then have a home and make the home and have children and raise the children, then you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to put on your makeup if you don't want to. You don't have to get in the car. You don't have to, you don't have to work, at a job where you sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. You don't have to do any of that. So that's why we can make fun of those girls, because they're missing that. And so I think, right, like, we've come back around to this idea that maybe women are not cut out in the way that men are for that sort of hard charging, like, ambitious lifestyle, as a general rule. I mean, obviously each person is different, but in general, maybe women are not as predisposed to that as men are. But then what are they supposed to do? I don't think it's watch Netflix.
Now this is like a question that I would probably ordinarily ask someone like Spencer or your dad, because they talk about it more. But
Uh-oh.
I'm hearing this, but I'm also thinking about the economic circumstances in the United States. And I totally agree with you, obviously, but I'm thinking of like my students. I teach like AP seniors and stuff like that. And they're all expected to go off to college, and then they graduate with, $80,000 in college loan debt, which is like, that's the amount of a mortgage, or it used to be the amount. I know, not anymore. Well, that's part of what I'm talking about, is that these kids can't afford houses.
Yeah.
They can't afford to pay off their college debt. The inflation is out of control. And so do you think that one of the things that's preventing young people from orienting themselves in this more traditional way that might make them happy has to do with the way that we organize our society economically? I know this is something your dad talks about a lot, but is it possible for young people, even if they wanted to live that dream that you're talking about, which is really a beautiful dream, I think?
Yeah, I can't speak to the economics of it all because that's not my area of expertise, but I will say that I think that what I was just talking about before about the TikTok girls and the thing that's missing at the center of what they're saying, it's missing for men too. So men now don't have, which they shouldn't have since women have stopped asking for it. They don't have at the center of their kind of thought processes, oh, the reason that I need to go out there and, follow my career and do everything that I want to do is so that I can have a nice wife who keeps a home and, raises the children, and so that I can also afford to pay for now that we understand that women are not just little baby making machines. So we do live in the modern era. Like I can also afford to help her kind of start her YouTube channel or whatever, whatever she wants to do, or write books, or whatever, they don't have that as their central kind of reason for the ambition. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, that's the only reason that men should work. They should have things that they're interested in too. But why are you doing that? Why are you going out there to try to make all this money? Like, what is it for? Like, Is it for your Rolex watch and your like Corvette? Okay, fine. No, like it should be for your family. And if they aren't willing to do that, then women aren't willing to do the other thing, right? Like they're not willing to stay home and keep house. But also like feminism has told us, that we're not supposed to want that. We're not supposed to do that. So, and then we've all gone off and girl bossed. And so then the men are kind of left being like, oh, okay, well, what is my purpose?
What am I for?
Yeah. What's my job? What am I here for? And then, so I think it's true that we have all this debt and everything. And so it does make it sort of financially difficult to do things. But I also think there needs to be a kind of cultural shift so that these things become tied again to the reasons why it's important to do them. And then I think people, because there are so many people now just sort of saying, like, I can't find a husband, I can't find a wife, everybody's sort of sad, and I think it's because, right, like you can't find the yin to your yang because everybody's yin or yang, like you can't find the things that go together so that you can go out and spend all those hours at the office so that you can make enough money to pay off your debt because your kids are taken care of at home. If you can't do that because they're not taken care of at home and you have to pick them up from the nanny at 5 o'clock, So I think that's sort of the central problem, really.
Sounds like what you're saying is that economics and politics, to quote your dad, but Andrew Breitbart before him, are downstream from culture.
Always. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so strange because everyone's so atomized today too, that it's even harder to meet someone in person because there's like all the dating apps and Tinder where it's like, you just look at someone's picture and you're trying to like choose from a catalog who you want to go on a date with. And you don't actually feel their essence. You don't feel that connection. And so you have no idea if you're even compatible. And you probably just swiped the wrong direction through someone who you were compatible with because their picture was a little off or something. They didn't come off as they do in person. So yeah, one challenge is going to be getting out of that kind of.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people are stuck.
I completely agree with that. And I hear that all the time. I mean, I am so lucky that I met my husband on the first day of college, and that was that. Like, I didn't have to worry about all of that. But, it's weird because I think there was a time, when the dating apps were helpful because they were new and people were kind of on them, and maybe they were being a little bit more kind of discerning, or there wasn't as many of them, or as many people weren't on there, or something like that. And because I think it's true that, like, if you are not someone who likes to go out and drink at bars, then, like, going out and drinking at bars is not a good way to meet your future spouse, because
Right.
you don't want someone who likes to go out and drink at
and
bars.
are you
right?
going to necessarily meet your future spouse at a bar? Like, you
Right.
know, like, I don't know. Yeah.
Right. So I think, like, but now, I mean, yeah, we're getting more and more and more kind of compressed into our homes and into our screens, and all of these things that we're not meeting each other. And I think that's really sad. And people, I'm just hearing that a lot. Young people are saying, I want to meet this person. I want to meet the person who will, go out and work so I can start a home, or who will, stay home and raise my kids so I can work, or whatever. I want to meet that person, but I can't find them. I don't know where they are.
So you've written nonfiction. I remember you having you on to talk about
Saving Cinderella.
Saving Cinderella. I for some reason I thought it was Princess State of Mind.
No,
the book. No, it's Saving Cinderella. You're right about that.
It is. I used to have a little YouTube show called Princess State of Mind.
Oh, okay.
But,
that's what I was remembering. Okay. Yes. The Saving Cinderella. That was a very good book, but this is your first foray into fiction. What challenges did that present? This is presumably you've written fiction before, but this is your first published fiction. Was the process different? Did you find that it came naturally to you? Did it take you a long time, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I have written many novels. They live very happily together in my desk drawer, never seeing the light of day, and I'm sure they're having a lovely time in there. But I don't think they will ever come out. And so, yeah, this is my first published one, and because of that, it actually was a joy. I mean, this is what I've always wanted to do, and I was very lucky to have a sort of freelance career in nonfiction, and to publish that nonfiction book about Disney, and to write several articles in different places. But really, this is what I want to do. I want to tell stories, and it's what I've always wanted to do. And so I was able to sell this book to the Daily Wire before I wrote it. And so I knew that this one was not going to live in the desk drawer. This one was going out into the world. And that made it such a joy to sit down and write, because I think in a lot of ways, a novel is communication. It's me talking to you. And so if I don't feel like there's a you that's out there that I'm talking to, it's kind of a sort of weird and not very fulfilling process. So this was very, very fulfilling to do, to know that it was going to get out there, that people were going to read it, for better or for worse, and that it had the sort of amazing team at the Daily Wire who was going to do a lovely cover and make the book look great, and all of these things. To know that it took about 9 months to write it, like to write a first draft from start to finish. And then there were, I think, about 3 months of editing back and forth with the Daily Wire, with the editors there. And then there was a period of time when it was all done, but it wasn't Christmas time yet, so it didn't come out. So I think from sort of them accepting the book to having it come out, I think it was about a year and a half or so.
Pretty quick.
Yeah.
I guess so. I mean,
I don't know. We don't have really a good sense, because we've been writing a book together for 5 years, and it
sounds like you guys have a lot else on your plate, a lot of other things on your plate. I mean, I think it's funny because it seems like a long time to me, because I think if I had 8 hours a day to write, I could write it in 3 months, but I really wrote this during my toddler's nap time. I mean, that was it. So he naps for about an hour, maybe.
That's impressive.
And that was the time. So I think that's why it took me longer than I think it would if I was just going to sit down and write for 8 hours a day.
All right, just a couple more questions. I wanted to ask you, we're just talking about the Daily Wire. What was it like working with the team at DW Books, which is a new publishing outfit? And I'm kind of just hearing about the fact that they're publishing books now from buying your book. I think Jonathan Isaac had a book published with them. I think they've done a few now. I'm just kind of excited that that's happening. And they're just getting started. So what was it like working with them? And are they putting a lot of money into the publishing? Because I mean, look at how beautiful the book is.
And it even has the
It's
red.
got the red, but also the book underneath the cover is really nice as well. It's got a nice little etching on the binding. This is a beautiful book. So what was that process like, and where do you think they're going? You'd know more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I am so happy that they're doing this. This is the first novel that they have done. And as you say, they have published several other books, works of nonfiction. You know, Carol Markowitz and Bethany Mandel have books with them, and several other kind of public figures have written nonfiction books, great books with them. And so they had been kind of established for a little while in that domain when I came to them with this novel, but I kind of knew that they were looking to kind of branch out into fiction. And so I kind of said, hey, well, how about this? The process was fantastic. I mean, they operate like a traditional publisher. So everything that you know about publishing happened, and in that we signed a contract, and, there was an advance, and I'll get royalties if enough books get sold and stuff like that. And they couldn't have been more lovely, more supportive. The editing process was so smooth. I mean, it was great. Everybody that works there is lovely and very supportive. And I mean, I don't know too much about the inner workings of it. I'm very much still kind of on the author side. Like, I write the book and I send it in, and then they go back and forth. But then this is what's amazing about it. They put together the book. So, I mean, people, I mean, you probably know this, but a lot of people don't know, like, authors don't really have a lot of say in their covers. So like the cover just comes to you and you're like, wow, good job. That's amazing. And, people will say to me like, good job on the cover. And I'll be like, not me. I didn't, yes, it's great, but I didn't do it, and the same with the edges and all the artwork that's inside and the art on the, on the book itself. So, I mean, their art department is fantastic, and everything that they are doing. So I'm really excited that it exists. I hope to work with them again in the future.
That's awesome. And I'm just glad they exist, because we have this landscape out there now. And I'm sure you know this better than anyone, where it's like, Amazon now controls like 80% of the book market, right? So like, if they don't want a book published, or if they're unlikely to publish a certain book, publishers are going to be very risk averse with a project like that. So it's really good that you have Regnery, and you have a few other minor publishing houses, but it's really good that Daily Wire is doing this, because if they don't, who else is going to do it? So
no, I agree. I mean, there certainly are conservative publishing houses out there, and I'm very grateful that there are, but I'm also grateful that Daily Wire is now one of them. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been a total pleasure having you. And this book was really great. Guys listening at home, please pick this up. I know Faith is a good writer and a very smart person, and princess of the multiverse, but I thought this is Faith's first attempt at publishing a novel, and I wasn't sure what to expect. This is an amazing book. It's really like a fun read. It's exciting. There's a lot going on. There are deep themes. I was really impressed, and I hope people at home go pick this up and leave it a 5-star review on Amazon. Where can people find you, Faith?
Yes, well, thank you for that, and I really appreciate it. My website is faithkmoore.com, so you can find me there, and if you want to get in touch, that's a good way to do it. And I'm also on X, Twitter, whatever, at Faith K. Moore, and that's another good place to find me.
Are you working on anything now? Like, I know, as you said, the publishing process is really slow, you've had time. Have you come up with any other big ideas? Are you starting work on a new novel, or can you not talk about it?
I can't really talk about it, but there are things in the works.
Okay.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Well, thanks again, Faith.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Bye.